From three imaginary boys to Gothic rock legends, we explore the discography of The Cure next on Booked on Rock. Hey everybody, welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. We have a first-time guest on the podcast, Matthew Davis. He's the author of The Cure, every album, every song. It's part of Sonic Bond's On Track series. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Always good to talk to a fellow Cure fan. Always love talking about The Cure. When did you become a fan?
Well, this 1996. So going back a fair ways now, when I was rather young. Was first intrigued by I suppose there was a girl at school who I fancied, and she liked them. So that was when I first heard of them. I listened to them a bit back then and didn't really get into it. I was more of a sort of a dirt head, sort of metalhead kind of guy at the time. So I didn't really get into alternative stuff that much. And then a couple of years later, I gave it another try. I still didn't quite sink in. And then I saw there's a TV show down here called Rage that plays music videos all night. And they did like a punk rock special. And afterwards, they played all the Cure videos from the start up until Wild Mood Swings. And I taped that almost by accident. And I watched it after the punk special, and I thought, okay, that's cool. Then I watched it again, and then again, and then again. And that was kind of my in. And from then I started buying more of the CDs, and became obsessed very quickly, really. And they pretty much instantaneously became one of my favorite bands of all time, or my actual favorite band of all time.
And when you talk about The Cure, you got to talk about Robert Smith. He's the man. And The Cure, this is what you write here in the book. The Cure is the result of a dreamy boy who created a world of his own, and we often like to take a trip into that world. Give us a brief background of Robert and how The Cure is formed.
Early versions of the group go back to the mid-'70s. The band that we came to know as The Cure probably dates back to 1976. So Robert Smith was always there. He was always playing guitar. He wasn't the singer to start with. He didn't really want to be the singer at first. But Michael Dempsey and Lowell Tolhurst, the rhythm section, they were there. And Paul, now Pearl, was the lead guitarist who did 3 different stints over the history of the band.
Pearl Thompson?
That's right. And started out playing covers and stuff like that, as pretty much all musicians do. I did it myself too, just learning the ropes, learning about structure and things like that, and learning how to perform in front of people. And then they called themselves Easy Cure at a certain point because that was one of Lowell's songs. They picked it out of a hat. And then eventually Robert didn't like it. It sounded too hippie-ish. So he took Easy off and put the on there because that was kind of the thing to do at the time, using the definite article. And it stuck. That was about 1977, I think. It's a bit hard to pick the actual beginning of The Cure, so to speak, because they sort of had that slow formation, and they tend to state 1978 as their birth year. So, but versions of the band were around for a couple of years before that, yeah.
And then the first album, they were signed to the label and released an album in the UK only.
There were a version of it did come out overseas shortly after that. But Three Imaginary Boys, their first record, that was released overseas as Boys Don't Cry. With a slightly different track list. I've got that on LP. It came out on Stun Records over here. They actually had a better track listing because they didn't get to choose the songs on the first record. Their manager and producer at the time, he just took it on upon himself to sequence the songs, and he chose some of the less strong material that they had laying around, and Robert wasn't very happy with that. So Boys Don't Cry swapped out some of the weaker stuff for some of the other non-album singles, like Boys Don't Cry itself, which wasn't even on the record to start with. And it's a stronger representation of their early material anyways.
And the Cure sound that's so familiar to many, that's not what we hear on this album. It's a very different side. It is new wave. It's kind of post-punk.
Yeah, kind of a scrappy, literate post-punk kind of sound. It's a bit thin. It's fairly succinct, which is something the Cure weren't always known for being later. They got in and got out fairly quickly with their songs. But I mean, there are still the voices there. And they're starting to touch upon the kind of themes and sounds that they would later to greater effect. But a lot of it's a very formative record. But they're only 20 years old when it came out.
And Robert wasn't a big fan of the album, and we know why, because he had no creative control over it. But it's interesting, he's always kept Boys Don't Cry. And that's a song that he's kept in the set list from the start. So he definitely has an affinity for that song.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the second most played song out of the whole lot. I mean, partly because it's so old, obviously, but also, yeah, it's been proved a really popular song. It's found a lot of use over the years in various formats. It's been a bit of a touchstone, a bit of a sort of alt rock classic. But yeah, he's otherwise downplayed that material. But as you would, I mean, these are songs he wrote that he was in his teens. I mean, most of us would look back at the person we were then and go like, yeah, okay, that guy had no idea what he was doing. So it's absolutely understandable he would feel that way.
Second album, you lead the chapter on this album, which is 1980's 17 Seconds, with a quote from Robert. He says, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with 17 Seconds. I knew exactly how I wanted it to sound, and I didn't want anyone to interfere with that. It features the single Forest. This is the beginning of Robert Smith's Cure that we know, and it's also the debut appearance by a very important member of the band, which is bassist Simon Gallup, who Cure fans know how important he is to this lineup, but the average fan may not know, but he is essential to this lineup. Talk about how the writing of this album began in the aftermath of a Newcastle gig in October of 1979.
Yeah, well, I was a bit surprised myself to go back and read about that. So essentially, Robert got in a fight with a few businessmen in a hotel and got beaten up and went back to his hotel room and wrote most of the lyrics for the album in one sitting. And then when they got home, he sat down with his guitar and his sister's organ and started putting together the music for it. And he already had a fair idea of how he wanted the next record to sound. Their bass player at the time, Michael Dempsey, wasn't a big fan of it. He was always more of a notey player. You know, he wasn't into the sparse sound that Robert wanted, because you know what Robert was pushing for was everything to be more simplified, pushed back, um, and more spacious. And Michael didn't really like that sound, so they kind of edged him out and brought in Simon Gallup, as you said, who's the other mainstay of The Cure. He's been there almost the entire time, apart from that first record. He had a brief hiatus a few years later, but otherwise he's always been a part of the band, and he's regarded as, you know, an essential part of the band by many, including myself. He's a big personal influence on me also as a bass player. You know, I can hear his influence when I play.
My God, so many bass lines that you recognize from Cure songs, and he's the guy. And he was Robert's best man at his wedding, or vice versa.
Yeah, they've been best friends for a long time,
Yep.
yes.
They had a falling out for a little bit, and then
That's still a few years off in the future, and they've had a bit of a contentious relationship from time to time. But I mean, you know, best buds will be like that sometimes, as long as you get through it, make up again afterwards.
a year after, The Cure released 1981's Faith. And now for me, Faith is the first Cure album where I could say I'm a huge fan of the album from start to finish.
Hmm.
Primary was the single, but All Cats Are Gray, my standout favorite from this album. Heavily influenced by the death of Robert's grandmother and other family frailties, as you write. And he was really questioning his own faith at this time, and he seemed to be self-medicating with drugs, right? Around this time?
Yeah, that's something that people didn't really understand, or I didn't even think of for a long time. I never associated the Cure with drugs. I mean, I knew that they liked to drink, but it wasn't until later in my fandom that I realized that they went through a few drug phases as well, over an extended period of time, really. So yeah, that record, I mean, cocaine was starting to come into the picture pretty heavily, which was making things a bit fractious in the studio, and they couldn't really lock down what they were after. They were after a very funereal kind of grey kind of vibe, and they weren't getting that first. Everything just kind of sounded flat and dead, which was a bit more funereal than they were hoping for. Because they really did get a sort of drab majesty out of that sound in the end, you know. And Primary itself was a good example, because the original version was more upbeat, but it just didn't really have that same vibe. And then by the time they got to the album version, yeah, they stripped it down, they sped it up, and yeah, that's a classic number. I mean, and the fact that there's no guitar on it at all, it's just two bass guitars, and there's not even any keyboards on that. It's so sparse, and it doesn't sound empty. And it really does kind of sound unique. I mean, when the band has played it since on stage with a couple of guitars and keyboards in the mix, it doesn't sound the same. It sounds good still, but you can't go past the original for me, for the way that it sounds and the unique nature of it.
It sets up the first of the legendary trilogy of Cure albums. 1982's Pornography is next. Incredibly dark, intense, and reflective of Robert's mood at that time. What was it that was pushing him into this dark place, and how was that not just affecting the music, but Robert's relationship with his bandmates, Robert and Simon Gallup? This is where their relationship fell apart.
Well, again, drugs were playing a part. I mean, I wouldn't say that was it. Robert was also just going through a bit of a strange phase himself. I mean, he'd been through a sort of having grown up in a sort of Catholic upbringing, he'd sort of rejected that, and then he was questioning all of that during the faith era as well, and wondering what that meant to him. And I think he was just having a hard time understanding the world around him, dealing with people, and of course, the Cure were just working flat out at that point. They've been going solid for years. I mean, this is an era when bands will put out an album every year, plus they put out non-album singles as well, and they're touring the rest of the time. So this never had a break. So it's understandable the stress would get the better of them after a while.
What did you think when you first heard this album? Because for me personally, it didn't hit me at first. Years later, I listened to it. It's like, man, why didn't I like this as much? But you have to be in the right mindset. You got to be at maybe a certain time of year, maybe around now you get into the Halloween time, you start listening because it's intense. It's not one you're going to play at a party to get people up and on the dance floor.
No, not necessarily. Depends on the type of party, of course, and the
So I
type of
guess
people that you
that's
have
true.
around you.
That's true.
Yeah, when I first heard it, I mean, I'd started collecting the back catalogue of Cure records at that point. This is sort of early on in my fandom, and so I'd only heard "The Hanging Garden" off that because it was on "Standing on the Beach." It was the only single off the record because it didn't produce a number of sunny pop hits, funnily enough. Um, and that one, yeah, I ordered it and listened to it a few times. Thought, oh, that's pretty cool. But it wasn't really until a few months later, and I had my heart broken, that I really sort of started to vibe on that record and understand. And I found myself like sitting in my car at the beach late at night, like just smoking cigarettes and sort of wallowing in self-pity and listening to that record. And I was like,
Yeah.
I get it now.
Yeah.
And it was actually a real help to me at the time. It really did help me to deal with some of those emotions, and partly for that reason, perhaps it's still one of my very favorite Cure records. It does have I do feel a deep connection with it. I do feel they never really topped it in some ways. I mean, it's kind of a primitive and brutal record. There's almost like a heavy metal intensity to it at times, which I've rarely touched upon since.
Yeah, primitive is a good word too, because the album cover too is it's just a distorted picture of the three guys, and then you have at the end on the title track, there's a story behind that, like what we're hearing there. They're watching something on television at the time they were recording.
That's right. They recorded some material off TV. Part of it was um, like a talk show. I think it was a debate between, or a discussion at least, involving Graham Chapman from Monty Python and I forget who else it was now. I think a prominent
The
feminist figure at the
politician, or
time.
yeah, it was, but it's so effective. It's so disturbing. It's just
Yeah, it
perfect.
is
But
quite disturbing.
what's interesting is you get to the next album, Japanese Whispers, 1983. Definitely not pornography. Part two. Okay, this is upbeat. Let's go to bed. The Walk, the Love Cats. Talk about this album and what Robert's intent was with the songs with this that he and his bandmates wrote.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of going from watching literal pornography to watching, like Care Bears or something like that. It's such a
Yeah,
drastic change. Um, so I included this record in the book, even though it's not technically an album. It's a collection of singles. So there were three singles they put out around this time, which with the loose title of the Fantasy Trilogy. So Let's Go to Bed, The Walk, and The Love Cats. And they were a drastic change. Robert wanted to basically just get rid of the sound that the Cure had and get rid of even their following and just sort of dismantle the whole thing because he was so sick of it. And it just dragged him down so far and realized he didn't want to be like that anymore. And he got straight a bit and just thought, okay, I'm not having any fun with this anymore. It's gone as far as it can go. So let's, for a laugh, let's just destroy it all and move on. And it didn't really work that way. Somehow people still connected with the music, even though, I mean, in the first draft of the book, I said, like a more modern example would be like if Trent Reznor did, the Downward Spiral and the Fragile, and then put out something that sounded like Britney Spears. I mean, in the
yeah,
same, I
right.
mean, it's such a drastic change of pace. I'm surprised that his career did manage to survive all of that, frankly, but I'm very glad that it did.
Huge risk, but you could see where he had that ability to write a great pop song with Let's Go to Bed. And The Walk was influenced, I believe he was getting into the Joy Division at the time.
Well, it was compared to New Order a lot. It was
Or New
quite
Order,
similar.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking Joy
yeah.
Division.
Well, very close.
Yeah, but he was inspired by New Order. Yeah, that was his thing. He was getting into that. But you can see how he's developing his songwriting skills. And then you have the top released in 1984. The fifth studio album features the single The Caterpillar. Although Robert had promised a solo album for a long time, it's never happened. Yet you write that this is widely regarded as the closest thing to a Robert Smith solo project. What sets this album apart from other Cure albums in that regard, in your opinion?
Well, this is an era when Simon Gallup wasn't in the band. So for the singles that comprise Japanese Whispers and then the top as well, to start with, the band was just Robert and Lowell Tolhurst. And Lowell has switched over from drums to keyboards, which sort of reduced his presence in that, like he wasn't playing on every song now. Uh, and also he was still learning. So, I mean, Robert wrote most of those songs alone. I mean, Lowell did chip in for some of the songs, so he does get a credit on some of those songs. But otherwise, the record was largely just Robert and then Andy Ennison playing drums, who'd stepped in around the Love Cats era. So most of that record is just the pair of them. Paul makes a brief appearance on saxophone on one song, and he joined the band for the tour and then became a mainstay after that. Lowell wasn't as involved. He was becoming more of an alcoholic at that point. So he wasn't as directly involved. I mean, Robert was technically an alcoholic too, but I mean, Lowell is the one who became known as an alcoholic and eventually became, so afflicted by it that he couldn't function anymore. So ultimately, just Robert getting out of his head and then spending hours in the studio. And at that point, he was also working on other records because he was in Susie and the Banshees at that time as well as their guitarist. So he'd been going back and forth between like touring and recording with them and then touring and recording with The Cure. And he also had a side project with Steve Severin from the Banshees, which is called The Glove.
Yes.
An insane work ethic. I mean, he was literally taking a taxi from one studio to another and then sleeping for a couple of hours a night wherever he could, and just of course indulging in way too many drinks and substances as well, to the point where he just couldn't handle that anymore, and he had to step out of the Banshees because it was just eating up too much of his of everything, really, time, energy.
Lowell Tolhurst, did you read his book? I haven't yet.
Yep. So he's got two books out. First one is Two Imaginary Boys, which is kind of his story in The Cure. And then a couple of years ago, put out another book called Goth, A History, which is more about, talking about the roots of the genre and The Cure's connection to it. So it's still got some quite personal stuff and reflections from his time in The Cure, but it's not about The Cure per se. Whereas, Cured is very much, Cured to Imaginary Boys. That one, or Tale of Two Imaginary Boys. I'll get the title right by the end of this
You'll
interview.
get it right.
Yeah, that one's very much a memoir, which is always curious when you're reading a memoir by someone who spent most of the time they're talking about wasted off their head, on drugs and alcohol. You're like, how much of this do I actually believe? Because, I mean, it's a strange thing. When I was reading Al Jorgensen's book, like from Ministry, he's saying like, oh, if you remember the 80s, you weren't there. Then he goes on to like detail the 80s in graphic detail. And it's like, you were taking more drugs than anyone else at that time. Why should we take any of this at face value? And some of what Lowell says obviously is contradicted by things that Robert has said in interviews. So it's really a matter of picking who you believe. And while most people would default to Robert, I mean, he's been a bit tricksy with the truth from time to time too. He likes to be a bit playful about things, come up with alternate versions. He used to lie in interviews all the time because he get bored of saying the same thing. So he would just make things up for his own amusement. So sometimes you do got to wonder what's actually true. And that's one thing with doing this book. I've kind of had to walk the line, try and find my own space because I'll be reading old interviews. It's like, remember, he might just be taking the piss here. And then reading more recent ones where he's probably telling the truth as far as he recalls it. But then who knows how well he recalls it after all this time and the state he was in at the time.
I think he's on pretty good terms with Lowell nowadays. I think I saw an interview
Yeah.
Lowell talked about that. So that's cool. I don't know. Has he ever appeared with the band over the years since he was out? He was out in like 89.
So the end of 1988, after they finished Disintegration, they had a falling out. Lowell was not happy. He hadn't really been involved in the album process anyways. I don't think he even really actually appears on the record. I mean, he claims to, but it's hard to tell. But he's credited on albums as like playing other instrument. So he wasn't always doing all that much, and his participation did decline album after album to the point where Disintegration, I mean, at least one song on that record came from an idea of his musically, but I don't know if he actually appears on it at all. But they had a falling out end of '88, and the rest of the band said, we're not when we go on tour, we don't want him to be there, otherwise we're not going. So Robert had to make a choice. And then there was a quite torturous lawsuit for a while in the '90s where Lowell was trying to gain ownership of the name, which would have been a very weird scenario had that come to pass. And he lost that quite comprehensively. And then they did talk for a while, and then they did reconnect over time. Probably about 2000, I think. they really reconnected in person. And then 2011, when The Cure decided to do these shows called Reflections, it was they're playing the first three records. So Three Imaginary Boys, 17 Seconds, and Faith. They came over here to Australia to do it first at a festival here in Sydney. And they're playing all three albums in their entirety. And for the Faith album, they got Lowell to come on stage and play keyboards and additional percussion. And then they did an encore series of these shows, like in New York and places like that, in London. So there's probably about a dozen shows that Lowell played on with the band after his departure, much later. And they're on good terms now, which is pretty awesome. I mean, it's always good when these things come back around and you can see old friends reconciling, and it's kind of a happy ending, which is something us romantics really like.
Absolutely. Going back to the timeline now, so we're up to 1985. The Cure released an album that marks the beginning of the band's peak commercially successful years, and that's Head on the Door. In Between Days, Close to Me, two singles on there. And there was an excitement that returned to the band on this album, specifically with Simon Gallup, right?
So Robert and Simon had met up again, and they'd basically reconciled the differences, and Simon came back to the band, which was a real shot in the arm for them. Robert said that everyone just sounded more excited when Simon came back. It really gave them an injection of fresh excitement and attitude. And the album itself is like a real confection of pop highlights. Like it's the top had things like The Caterpillar, which was very much in the vein of the fantasy singles. But this one, the top also had darker moments. It was very, very diverse. Whereas this one, it was still very diverse, but it was more upbeat all the way across. I mean, it ends with Sinking, which is still a fairly gloomy song. But otherwise, it's very much an upbeat record. And it really plays to that side of the band. And that was the first album as well where Robert actually wrote all of the songs, and they're all credited to him. See, before that, the songs would be credited to the band. Whoever was in the band at the time, when they made the record, they would get a songwriting credit on each song because he thought that was a fair thing to do. Plus, everyone was chipping in to some degree, although that fell off after a while. And with the Head on the Door, Robert really said, okay, so here's the songs we're doing. And just had like a demo tape with like him just like on a basic guitar saying, okay, if I can make these songs work like this, then they'll work with a whole band. So he just did really basic demos and presented them to the band. They learned the songs, they went into the studio.
Matthew Davis is the author of The Cure Every Album, Every Song. Riding high on the success of The Head on the Door, which reached number 7 in the UK, 59 in the US, along with the singles collection Standing on a Beach, which you mentioned. The Cure, you write, were in good spirits when they convened to work on the next album in 1986, and it resulted in the album Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, which had a working title of 1 Million Virgins. I didn't know that. Robert wrote the last album on his own, like you said, but that changes with this album. Talk about that and the difference you hear in the songs as a result.
Yeah, so for this record, Robert said to start with, I want to tape off all of you with some songs or at least some ideas. So everyone stepped up and actually wrote some material and presented it, and then they all sat down, listened to the songs, and everyone, gave them marks essentially to say which one they wanted to do. And then so when they went to France to record that record, I mean, they ended up with well over 20 songs. The album itself ended up with 18 songs on it, and then they had a whole bunch of B-sides as per usual. Um, so yeah, there's a couple of songs on there that Simon Gallup wrote the music for. I think there's 2 that he did and 3 that Paul Thompson and Boris put together. I don't know how much input Lowell had on that one. But even Boris Williams, who'd been playing drums for them since late 1984, he came up with a tape of drum rhythms and stuff like that. So at least he was willing to be involved in the process. And didn't come from the Thompson twins, where he didn't really have any involvement in the music. He was just playing along with program beats and stuff like that, and just playing very basic stuff. So he was very pleased to be able to just come up with his own beats, but also to be able to say, well, here's some rhythms that I want to use. So yeah, it definitely led to a more collaborative kind of sound. I mean, it's still very much led by Robert, and he still wrote most of the music and all of the lyrics.
Has the singles Why Can't I Be You, Catch, Hot, 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 and Just Like Heaven, which is, in my opinion, really a perfect pop rock song. I mean, it's absolute perfection. Share what you write in the book about the writing of the song.
So the lyrics, yes, this is about like a holiday on beach he had with Mary, his partner of many years. They got together when they were 15 years old.
Still together.
Yeah, still together after all these years. It's a real romance story, Um, kind of relationship goals in a way. My partner and I are very affected by that. I wish that we'd met when we were that young so we could be together for that amount of time. But Yeah, so she's always been his muse, and he's always been his rock, and held him together when he was in danger of falling apart. It must be strange to be a person like that and just know how many love songs have been written about you, or just how many songs in general. I mean, I can't think of anyone else who'd have more songs written about her, apart from maybe historical figures or someone like Marilyn Monroe, where a lot of people who didn't know her have probably written songs about her. But I mean, to know that there are like dozens, or if not hundreds of songs inspired by you, including some of the best songs of all time, the most romantic songs of all time, it must be quite an interesting space to be in. But so lyrics were about that, an experience that Robert and Mary had when they were down there at Beachy Head, where the Close to Me video was shot. And the music, Robert had written a little instrumental demo. It was called Shivers at the time. And he thought it sounded too much like Another Girl, Another Planet by the Only Ones. The rest of the band said, nah, you'll be fine, basically. So they sped it up a bit and just used this compositional trick that they had started using probably years before, and which they still deploy from time to time now, where basically start with one or two instruments, add another one, add another one, add another one. See that the way they used to use that in the old days was maybe we start with the drums, and then the guitar will come in, and the bass, and the vocals, and you get to the end, and they drop out one by one too. So we had like maybe just the drums going. In this case, obviously, start with the bass and the drums, and the acoustic guitar comes in, and then you've got your guitars come in and the keyboards before that theme comes in. Also, the song was used as theme song for a French TV show at the time, so the instrumental would have been familiar to some viewers in France, at least at the time, before it was released as a single.
The album reached the top 40 in the US, number 35, number 6 in the UK. So now The Cure are worldwide stars. And Robert is becoming part of mainstream culture thanks to not just the music, but the looks, the Gothic look. And he inspired so many, like Edward Scissorhands, and you see it everywhere in the late 80s. But they still have another major artistic and commercial accomplishment ahead of them, and that's 1989's Disintegration, which to me is one of the greatest albums in rock history, period. Number 3 in the UK, number 12 in the US. Considered the second now in that Cure trilogy, that conceptual trilogy. We have Lullaby, Fascination Street, Love Song, which reached number 2 on Billboard, and I forget which eclipsed it. I can't remember what was number 1 at the time, but Pictures of You, another single on there. And this is my gateway Cure album. Changed my life, I swear. I got it as a Christmas gift in 1991. So I go back about 5 years behind when you became a fan. First time I heard it, my roommate had it in college. I mean, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. It just took me away to a whole other world. Robert was late 20s at that time, and he started singing about getting old like when he was 25, which is amazing. How did Robert's age influence this album? And what was he thinking heading into the recording of this record? He was thinking that this might be it for him and The Cure.
Yeah, when he was younger, I mean, he didn't anticipate living past 25. He thought he was probably going to die, quite fast and young and violently, probably. And he kind of lived that way, as if to try and make it come true. But having gotten past that and, become less of a menace to himself over the time, a bit more stable, I found himself approaching 30 and suddenly got really depressed. And so the whole album is about the horror of turning 30, which seems a bit strange when you get past that. I mean, once you get to 35 or once you start facing turning 40 or even further, you start thinking, God, what are you talking about? Cherish it while you can, man. And he did, he really made the most of it. I mean, that record is an absolute landmark. I mean, I was a bit slower off the mark with that one myself. Um, and so when I was going back and buying the albums, I said I had the singles collection. I went back from there and just whenever I could find one of the albums, I'd pick it up. I grew up in a country town, so when I came down here to Adelaide, which is the capital of South Australia, I would look around through the stores and I'd find another one, take it home, or I'd order them in through the local record store. I remember I ordered in, I already had Boys Don't Cry, but I had to get Three Imaginary Boys. And it took 13 months for the CD to come in to the music store in my little town. And it cost me $45, and at the time, like, CDs were costing $30 in Australia when they were new. So, yeah, it had to come all the way from West Germany. It took over a year and it cost me half as much again. But so Disintegration was one that I finally stumbled across. It was actually one of the last ones at the time I didn't already have. And it didn't hit me quite the same way at first.
Really?
Maybe because it's one of those records we hear so much about. Everyone's like, this is classic, this is legendary. And then you get it and you listen to it for the first time and you go, it's pretty good. Yeah, yeah, but it has to grow on you.
I know what you mean. Yeah, the bar is set very high, or the expectations are set very high.
Yeah, and also some of the best records of all time. I mean, they're growers. Like the first time you listen to it, you just don't understand because there's so much going on. I mean, the first time I heard the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, I was like, yeah, 5 out of 10. Like it's already heard Closer and March of the Pigs, and I thought I liked those, so they were already going. But the rest of it, there was just so much. It was so dense. I was like, I couldn't take it in at first. I'm like, okay, it's all right, but I don't really understand. And a week later, I was like, how could I possibly live without this record? Because I had time to give it space in my head and to grow and to get to know it. And it's the same with meeting people sometimes. You meet someone, you're like, oh yeah, hi, whatever. And then like months later, you're like, wow, what an amazing person because you've gotten to know them. And then you understand, like maybe you don't think they're attractive or anything at first, and later, but when you actually get to know them, their personality shines through, and suddenly they are. They kind of grow into themselves. But that record was kind of like that for me. I mean, whereas most fans would say this is the Cure album, my favorite Cure album, I never actually say that. It's in there, it's up the top, but it's not one of my absolute favorites. Which sounds like a sacrilegious thing to say, perhaps. I mean, it's
How
probably in the
dare you?
top three or top five. But I mean, when you got a catalog of such quality, I mean, really, it's hard to define which ones your top ones are. Anyway, I mean, when I was an angsty young man, I used to say that The Cure was my favorite band and Pornography was my favorite record of all time. And these days, I don't know if I could say that I have one favorite record of all time. I still would say that The Cure is my favorite band, just because they've had the most emotional impact on me.
What would you put as their number one album for The Cure then? What's at the top?
Um, I don't have one per se. I mean, Pornography would still be up there. Kiss Me would be up there. Disintegration would be up there. 17 Seconds. I mean, really, almost everything they put out in the 80s was just stone cold banger. It was just great. I mean, The Top is the only album for me that isn't like a straight 10 out of 10, and even that's like a 9. It's right up there. So, and it's not like they're slouches in the other sense. I mean, the 90s records are quite good as well, and everything they've done has been quality. And then the new album has been, much better than anything they've done for a long time.
Getting into the 90s, the first album of that decade, another commercial hit, 1992's Wish, number one in the UK, number two in the US. Friday I'm in Love reaches number 18 on Billboard. High and A Letter to Elise, the singles, or the other two singles, along with Friday I'm in Love. Tell us about Friday I'm in Love. The song started out quite differently.
Yeah, it's another song where Robert wrote it, and I think the original demo was much slower. And he kind of also thought it sounded too familiar. He thought it sounded like something else. He'd ring people up and say, "Hey, listen to this. Does this sound like something to you? Is this something you've heard?" And he would play it to these people that he knew, and they would say, "No, well, it doesn't sound that familiar." So he'd be like, "Okay, great, I'm having that." And again, it's another song where he took it in. It was a slower piece, and then Simon said, "That would make a great pop song. Why don't you just speed that up a bit?" And so they did that, and Simon's right again. Absolutely. I mean, it's a fairly classic piece of pop, more so than the Cure usually do, because often their take on pop is quite idiosyncratic. I mean, something like Just Like Heaven is quite a strange song, really, in that the chorus is almost, it's not an afterthought, but it's fairly minor compared to all the work that's done by the verses. For example, it's Friday I'm in Love. I mean, you've got really thematic, catchy verses and choruses as well. I mean, they're more of a type, more of a piece. They're more similar. It definitely sounds like an old 60s pop song or something like that they've just done a cover of, but it's very much their own work.
I'm fascinated by the songs that did make that album because Robert, at first, he intended it to be a double album. And one album was going to be the upbeat songs, one was going to be the down, gloomier side of The Cure. And then when Join the Dots, the box set came out, and they included the songs that he would have put on that double album. There are some I'll steal your phrase. There are some bangers on that. Some really, really good songs. I'm trying to think of some of the titles off the top of my head, but do you agree? Those are some
Yeah,
great
I know
songs.
he
I'll
agrees
look it
as
up.
well.
Let me look up those
I mean, this
tracks.
Twilight Garden is one of the songs that even
Yes.
he should have been on the record. It should have been on there. And yeah, you look at it and you think there's a couple of songs on there that are pretty good but not great. So maybe you could have snuck that on there instead, or done an expanded version, or like a double record.
But that was a label call, right? They did not want it to be a double album.
Well, that one is more like they wanted to do, well, they possibly could have done a double record, but they're talking about doing an instrumental record at the time, like a companion piece called Music for Dreams.
Oh, okay.
That's
So
right.
one was going to be instrumentals.
So at one point, um, Robert said, they could have made an album every 6 months if you didn't have to write words for it, because it was so very much easier for them to write music than it was to write complete songs. And some of those songs did come out, the ones that were going to be on Music for Dreams. There was an EP that came out called Lost Wishes. It was a cassette. There was a mail order for charity, and they had 4 songs in it, and those have been re-released since, and they're quite strong. So it would have been very interesting to see what they did with that if they'd done Wish, and then that era had done in that era had done like an instrumental record as well. But they did have quite a lot of other material for B-sides and things like that, which didn't make the cut. Um, and listen, this Twilight Garden is probably the strongest of them, but I mean, they're uniformly strong songs.
This Twilight Garden, yep. Play, Halo, The Big
Yes.
Hand is another one I love.
Mhm. Big Hand was a quite popular one, yes. It was going to be on the record, which is why there's a big hand on the artwork because Paul Thompson did the cover art for
Oh,
that one.
wow. Okay.
He quite liked it.
Yeah, now that makes sense.
It didn't make the cut in the end. There's Robert and Boris, I think, just didn't really vibe on that one as much as the others did. So,
Yeah, well, they only made one more album in the 90s. We can't forget Burn from the 94 Crow soundtrack, another great Cure song.
oh yeah.
But yeah, but only one other album in the 90s, and that was 1996's Wild Mood Swings, which was it went to number 9 in the UK, 12 in the US. The 13th was the lead single. Mint Car, Strange Attraction, and Gone. Those are all the singles there. The album didn't fare as well as previous ones, and attendance numbers dipped. The 4 year absence between albums, that didn't help. What is your opinion of that? Because I distinctly remember when the 13th was released as the lead single, and I didn't like the song, and I thought, well, and then when Mint Car came out second, it's why not lead with that one? But
Mm.
Robert wanted the 13th, but I don't know. Maybe it didn't matter. We were in a time now, 1996, where tastes are changing now. We're into Oasis was big, and so it was a different time. But also, did they wait too long?
Yeah, there is that. I mean, I wonder what would have happened if they released a record in 94 or 95, but they're going through some issues there anyways. I mean, Lowell's court case that he launched, they were dealing with that one. Then once that was over, I mean, like also Paul Thompson left at the end of the Wish tour to pursue other things. He wanted to play second guitar with Page and Plant.
Yeah,
Yeah, so to be in the band with half of his idols in Led Zeppelin was a real big deal for him. So and then Boris Williams left as well. So they're down to 3 people there for a while. Even Simon left briefly for a point, thinking that everyone else was leaving because of him, so he may as well go. So it was just down to Robert and Perry Belmonte for a while there, who was their second guitarist at the time. So it took a while for them to marshal the material, and then they basically hired out a manor, a country manor in England, and just set up a studio in that and lived there and played there and spent probably a bit too long going over it all. So the record could have come a bit earlier, but I don't know how much difference it would have made necessarily. Um, it did suffer because of changing tastes. I mean, Britpop was on the ascent at the time, and everyone was like, "Oh, Oasis is new," and like The Cure are a bunch of old farts now, and it just seems kind of ridiculous. It's Oasis are even are very revisionist. I mean, they took a lot of their sound from bands like the Beatles and Status Quo and things like that, and just sort of rehashed old riffs and old sounds, whereas The Cure didn't do that. They always kind of sounded timeless. I mean, there were points where they touched upon certain eras and certain sounds. I mean, like with the mixed up remix record that came out in 91 or 90. Um, that one was kind of touching on modern trends in dance music at the time. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think it's quite a strong record, but it's a bit of an idiosyncratic one. I mean, even by Cure standards, because it's all over the shop.
yeah, it's unbalanced.
Yeah, that's right. And looking at it now, you'd be like, okay, well, you knock off maybe these 2 or 3 songs. They had some quite strong B-sides that should have been on there. I mean, it used to be Me as that was on the 13th as the B-side, and that's more of a sort of classic Cure sounding song. And that's a really strong one, and that arguably should have been on the record anyways. Whereas the 13th, I mean, a very bizarre choice for a first single, especially when you've been away for 4 years or 3 years to come back with a record like that. That would have had all the fans going like, what's going on here exactly? Given that it has like kind of a salsa sound, and brass and stuff like that going on, it was a very strange choice. But then that's Robert for you. He's not going to do the expected. And it is a real grower as well. Whereas Mint Car, I mean, it's much more of an upbeat piece of pop, much more in the vein of stuff off um, Wish, but maybe a bit too much like Friday I'm in Love to be the first single, because it might have seemed like, okay, so we're back with the same sound. Whereas, yeah, coming back with here's a completely different sound didn't really work for them so well either.
Yep, yep. Jupiter Crash is a great tune off that
Oh, I
album,
love
and
it. Yeah.
Treasure Bear.
I
Yeah,
love
some good
Treasure.
stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Robert and the Cure start off the 2000s with the final of that trilogy, Blood Flowers. You lead the chapter on this album with, quote, "At the end of 1997, the Cure stock was low. Wild Mood Swings and Singles Collection Galore had underperformed on the charts, and mutters about their increasing irrelevance were gaining traction. Then in February 1998, they received a credibility boost from an unlikely direction. Robert appeared on South Park, voicing his heroic cartoon counterpart as he defeated the evil Mecha Streisand, and one character even shouted, 'Disintegration is the best album ever.' The Cure were cool again, and perhaps this played into Robert's next bout of songwriting. There were songwriting sessions in Christmas 1997, but Robert was not happy with what he heard. Talk about that and the song that pulled him out of that phase and really inspired him to move forward with a new batch of songs."
Well, they had the Galore singles collection came out in late '97, and that was a collection of songs from the Imperial phase, basically. So there's everything from Kiss Me, Kiss Me through to Wish, some of their best and most popular singles. The one new song on that, the one new single is called Wrong Number. And that was more of an electronic kind of number. They had Reeves Gabrels from Bowie's band at the time come in and play guitar on that one. Obviously, that would lead to further collaborations much down the line. Um, but I think they're writing more material in that kind of vein. I mean, what little that's come out is definitely more upbeat and more electronic influenced. And I think because that was the kind of sound du jour, they were leaning into that. Like everyone was kind of putting drum and bass beats and like more techno influence into their music around that time. And the Cure were doing it too. But Robert realized pretty quickly that they're going to be behind the trends if they did that. By the time the music came out, things would have changed and it would sound a bit dated. And a few years down the track, it was going to sound dated again. And then he wrote Out of This World, which is a much more mellow, reflective kind of song. And he thought, okay, so this is where it starts. Because often when he's making a record, he has like one song where he's like, okay, so this is the song where it starts. This is the first song, and this is going to kind of dictate the feel of the record to follow. So with that one, he thought, yes, okay, this is a brilliant song. This is where I want to be going. This is what sounds like the Cure. Never mind that other shit. We'll throw that in the bin. No good. And so yeah, most of it's remained there ever since, or it's been repurposed in a different style. So Bloodflowers took on a more reflective and doomy kind of vibe. And at that point, he said, okay, so this is when he announced the trilogy, so Pornography, Disintegration, and Bloodflowers. That before now, he wasn't like, okay, we've got two albums in a trilogy and we're going to write the third one. He kind of retroactively announced it when they did Bloodflowers. And then they played those three records together in a few shows in Europe and recorded them, released them as a DVD to give people an understanding of why they sort of fit together.
I've got that DVD. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. And they're playing three albums like that in one night. I mean, bands often these days will go out and play like a classic album in full, maybe a couple of songs for an encore. But the Cure have always played such long sets. To go out and say, okay, here's three albums, including like our longest ever record and with encores as well. I mean, you would know from watching the trilogy DVD, I mean, there's three albums worth of material there. And then they play a couple of songs as an encore. And there were more songs that didn't even make the DVD off the encore as well. I mean, you always get your money's worth when you go to see The Cure, that's for sure. I mean, I've seen them 4 times myself, and every time it's been 2.5, 3 hours at least.
Got to see them once. It was a great show in Boston. The greatest hits that came out in '01 had the song Cut Here. And again, here we have Robert teasing with the idea that maybe the band's over. And if you rearrange the letters, it spells The Cure. And okay, is this where he cuts it off? Is this, where he cuts it here? That's a great song, too. I love that one. Just Say Yes was another single from that. The Bloodflowers album, it wasn't intended to have any hit singles, but it did well. Number 18 in the UK, 16 in the US. Concert attendance numbers were on the rise again. 2 more albums released in the first decade of the 2000s. The top 10 self-titled '04 album and 413 Dream in 2008. And at this point now, it's The Cure are now a legacy act. And more and more of like the younger bands like Blink-182, they even had Robert on their album, and they're all looking up to him. And I remember MTV had, I think it was the Icon series or something like that, but they were celebrating The Cure. So things are starting to change for them in that way, in a good way. Robert, though, he said The Cure after Bloodflowers was over. What changed his mind, or who changed his mind, I should say?
Yeah, that was very much it's Ross Robinson we have to thank for that. So he was a pretty influential producer at the time. I mean, he did Korn's first 2 records. He did the first 2 Slipknot records as well. and a bunch of other related material. And he was known for getting a visceral intensity out of the musicians. He was a very confrontational producer. Like he wasn't one of these guys who sort of sits back and just focuses on the sounds. He wasn't like Rick Rubin, who would sort of pop in and play the guru and like give some feedback for a while and then disappear and let the engineers do the work. He would basically be in there with the band while they were recording. He'd be like jumping around the band while they're performing. He'd be like pushing them and stuff like that, trying to provoke more intensity out of them. Um, and so he was a massive Cure fan, and so he bumped into Robert somewhere, and just said, "Oh, I need to record a Cure album. You know, this is one of my bucket list items." And Robert's like, "Okay, we could do a solo album. I've been meaning to do a solo album for a long time." And Ross was really insistent that it had to be The Cure. And Robert had been pretty happy with the way things had panned out with The Cure, and he was kind of happy to leave it where it was with Blood Flowers and the tour that came afterwards. And it was a great tour. That was the first time I saw them live in 2000 here in Adelaide. I just moved here that very week. So I was kind of like, welcome to the wider world, you know. Um, and that was fantastic. Yeah, it was just an absolutely amazing show.
Robert's voice is still the same
Yeah, yeah.
to this
It's
day.
something is you listen to him and you're like, yeah, well, he's like in his 60s now. Of course, he sounds a bit different. I mean, you listen to someone like Glenn Danzig, he sounds kind of husky compared to the way he used to do. And fair enough, he's had a long career. I mean, these things happen. Your voice does change as you get older. But Robert, I mean, he basically sounds the same now as he did 40 years ago. I mean, it's remarkable how little he's changed. And that kind of suits because he's always been like young at heart and he sounds young as well. So it's very fitting. But so yes, he decided to do another record with Ross. They decided to make it a self-titled record. Ross wanted to make it like a big doomy disintegration type epic. That was what he was pushing for. But Robert thought if we're going to have a self-titled record, then it should cover all the different aspects of the band, and that included the poppier side as well. So he decided to include some of those songs, which in some cases kind of watered it down a little bit. There's still some really strong material on it, but it's not regarded as one of their best records. Usually, it sort of falls down towards the bottom when people are ranking their discography, which is not to say that it's bad at all. It's just that it's not as strong overall. And when you're standing up against the catalog that they recorded in the 80s, I mean, you have to do something really special to be included amongst those.
I agree. And 413 Dream, kind of the same feeling on that. There's always going to be some great moments in these albums, but as a whole, there's some there's some misses along with the hits. And that's why I'm just so pleasantly surprised by that last album, Songs of a Lost World. Before I ask you about that, and we wrap things up by talking about that last album, I haven't asked you about the rotating cast of band members in The Cure. You know, Wikipedia lists 23 different lineups. Why do you think there have been a lot of changes? I mean, is Robert hard to work with, or is it just an evolving band with members who evolve and have creative differences or other career opportunities? What do you think?
It really depends on the member in question, I think. I don't think it's particularly hard to be in The Cure, although, of course, you do have to understand that it's going to be Robert driving the car, so to speak.
He's the
Like you,
guy.
you're in the back seat saying, like, turn here or something like that. But I mean, you're never going to have full creative control. And as long as you're fine with that, and as long as you're easy to work with and understand what's going on. But I mean, they've had some members who have come and gone, like Pearl Thompson's been in the band three different times now in the 70s and again in the 80s and then again in the noughts. Simon Gallup's been there a couple of times. Perry Belmonte's come and, well, he was twice now. Roger O'Donnell has been in the band three different times.
See, that's interesting, though. So they're coming back. It's not like they're leaving and saying, screw you, I'm never talking to you again. Clearly,
No.
they want to come back.
Well, sometimes there's always been a personal connection. I mean, if you look at Pearl Thompson, for example, I mean, he goes by Pearl now. He changed his name after he left the Cure again for the third time. But he was dating Robert's sister back in the late 70s. They ended up getting married.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So he was married to Robert's sister, Janet. And they divorced in, I think, 2000. So he and Robert were actually related by marriage. And Simon Gallup's wife was called Carol Thompson. And a lot of fans believe that she was actually Pearl's sister, which would mean that they were all actually related by marriage at one point. Although I think she actually wasn't. I remember having to change that, change a reference to that, like at the very last second when we were putting the book out, because I'd read some forums and people were claiming that she wasn't related, even though someone who looks like she is. So I kind of had to make that less definitive. But yes, they were quite close. They still have an actual familial connection in the case of Robert and Pearl there for a while. And sometimes, like, there was this bad blood for a bit, and then after some time has passed and people grow up a little bit, they sort of realize that they want to be working together, they want to be friends again. And so they come back to the band. There's only been a few people that have been basically kicked out and have never returned. And, like Andy Anderson, for example, he was a drummer in 83 and 84. I mean, he was just a bit of a problematic drinker at the time. So, he would get drunk and cause trouble, and it's got to be too much. Point where you're going on a rampage through a hotel in Japan or something like that, security's being called and they're macing you and stuff like that. I mean, things are probably getting a bit out of hand. So he was let go for that reason. Lol, of course, because he was basically a useless alcoholic by that point as well in 1988. Though thankfully he cleaned up after that and he's had his own band since, and he's gotten his life in order. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. The Cure is kind of like a family in a sense. It feels like you might get away from them for a while, you might not talk very much, but the door is always open if you want to come back and if there's an opportunity for that. I mean, that was the thing with Songs of a Lost World. I mean, was the same lineup they'd had for years, but then when they started touring it, first night on stage, there's Perry Belmonte again, and no one saw that coming. And there he is. So they're back to a six-piece lineup now, and that's his second stint in the band. So you never really know what's going to happen with that.
Well, do you remember? I was worried that Simon was out again because he posted something on social media. It's maybe 3, 4 years ago. He's like, "I'm out. I can't really get into it, but adios. See you later." And you're like,
Yeah,
"Well, what? What the
that was
hell's going on?"
upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then next thing you know, he's up there on stage with them. I'm like, "Oh, thank you." So
Yeah,
yeah, it's like a family. You say there's probably just some disagreements, and maybe sensitive artists. Maybe they just they have it out, and then a month later they're like, "Yeah, everything's cool. Come on back."
well, I get the feeling that Simon is a fairly mercurial personality as well. I mean, he's said in interviews sometimes, "Look, I quit the band every other week. You just don't hear about
He's a fellow
it."
Gemini. I'm a Gemini too. Yeah, yeah. He's got there's two sides there. Depends on what mood he's in, I guess. But brilliant musician. I love Simon. And yeah, let's
Oh
finish
yeah,
with Songs of a Lost World, which came out a 16-year gap between
yeah.
albums 13 and 14, studio albums 13 and 14. 2024. To me, it's one of the best Cure albums. I mean, I know it's easily the best that they've put out since I would say Blood Flowers. What was going on during those 16 years? I mean, they were touring a lot. It's not like they were inactive. I just think maybe Robert wasn't inspired yet to write new music, or he was sitting on this music for a while. When they got into the Rock Hall in, was it 2018 they got it?
2019.
Or 2019? He's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
been 2019.
He's like, this next Halloween, you'll get it. It was another 5 years.
Yeah, he's infamous for making promises that he doesn't keep. That one. Uh, but yeah, he's found it harder to write lyrics over the years. Like writing music has been easy for him, but I mean, writing lyrics, I mean, because he said so much before, and there have been points in his career where he's kind of been rehashing themes that he's worked on before. So I guess it must be hard for him to go, what's something new that I can do that's not going to be so left field that people won't accept it. Um, but yeah, they were busy touring, and Reeves Gabrels joined in 2012 as a full-time member. So it's weird he's been there for 13 years now. He's only even played on one record. Um, so they were pretty constantly getting out there. I mean, I saw them again. It was the third time I saw them in 2016, then again in 2019 when they came over to Sydney and played at the Opera House and did Disintegration in its entirety. And then did a second set, which was all the B-sides off that record, plus a bunch of songs that have been unreleased. So some instrumentals and stuff that only came out on the deluxe expanded version of Disintegration many years later. So that was a quite interesting experience. And I was there on the first night. So yeah, to see that kind of stuff, to see someone who's played live for the first time ever, was very interesting. It was a very emotional time as well. So yes, I was struggling to keep myself together during that. But I guess Robert didn't really feel inspired to write lyrics or like didn't. I know at one point he thought these lyrics are terrible. This is some of the best music the band's written, and my words are crap. So they did start making that record in 2019. It was just after they came back from Australia, actually, I believe, that they went to Wales and started recording the album. So some of it dates back then. I mean, most of it. They did re-record chunks of it later after they hit the road again. Because after Simon announced he was leaving, and then they announced, well, actually, I'm still here. They started touring in late 22 and playing a bunch of new songs when they were out on the road. And they had more of a sort of grandly kind of drab kind of sound, like miserable but in a great way. Kind of reminiscent of Blood Flowers. pretty keyboard driven, pretty despondent. But they did that tour, and then people were saying, okay, well, when's the record coming? When's the record coming? And we waited, and then bang, yeah, finally they started teasing it, releasing snippets of songs through the WhatsApp account and people sign up to, and also having flyers up, with posters with a date on it in Roman numerals. And yes, it was the 1st of November that it came out. So All Saints Day. And they were back with Fiction Records for this one, who they hadn't worked with for, I think, nearly 25 years at that point. And that was actually something Robert stipulated the record had to come out on the 1st of November. Although which year was probably open to debate because we've been talking about it for a while. Yeah, so the record dropped, and yeah, it's a what I suppose you'd call a return to form. I mean, because I hadn't done a record in 16 years, and the two they'd done before that were, pretty good, but not great, not amazing. And this one, it definitely stands amongst their strongest work as a kind of, late career high point.
And unlike some of the albums in the 90s, maybe where there are too many tracks on there, you've got 8 songs.
Very succinct. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's trimmed down to the best of whatever he put together for songs heading in. Alone, the lead track is absolutely phenomenal. And End Song is my second favorite song. So you got the first track, final track are just brilliant, and everything in between it's just so powerful. There's just the magic seemed to be back, and he's now inspired again. I mean, he says there's going to be something following this now.
It's hard because like you think, okay, well, whatever got him going again, that's a good thing. Can we have more of that? And you think, well, the record was heavily inspired by the death of his parents and his brother. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we don't want more people he loves to be dropping off the twig just so he can get more great Cure music. But yeah, whatever. I mean, it did take a while, but it was worth the wait. I mean, you'd rather have that maybe than another couple of records in the same vein as the last couple, which felt a little bit like treading water. Whereas this one definitely feels like a confident stride forward. There is supposed to be another record or two following this one. So there was supposed to be another one about now before they went back out on the road. But so far we've gotten is a remix album. That was a 3-disc set or 2 discs in some cases, mixes of a Lost World, which is quite interesting. But it's a curiosity. It's a stopgap. It's not the next step along the path. So we're waiting now with bated breath for the next announcement for the next record because they did record enough material with the last record that they could have done a double, even a triple record at the time. But yeah, as you said, it was only 8 songs, and that was actually Mary's influence because Robert said, okay, it's going to be 12 songs, it's going to be 10 songs, and she said, well, you're like, it's going to be too much for people to take in. Want to keep it cut down a bit more, and it's going to have more impact. It's not going to drag on as much. Or leave people hungry for it. And yeah, she was right.
Less than an hour, 49 minutes, just over 49 minutes. And I noticed that some of the songs on here, it's the classic Cure sound with that great thematic grand opening where you don't hear Robert singing. It takes a little while, maybe like a third of the way into the song. But some of these songs, literally the first half of the song is instrumental. And then he comes in
Yeah,
with
end
the
song, it's
vocals.
6 minutes before he comes in out of
Yes.
10.
Yeah. Yeah. It's phenomenal. I love it. And the book is a nice way to get caught up for those who are maybe, passing fans of The Cure, just getting into them, because I have a feeling there's a lot of younger people now who are getting turned on to The Cure, and they want to know about the history of the band, and you can get it here. We should note, too, this book not only covers the studio albums and the singles, but this has the B-sides, the rare tracks, right? The live records, the remixes. It's all in here, so fans can expect to get a whole lot in this book.
Yeah, every officially released song up to this point, which was a bit of a problem because when I first signed the contract to do the book, it was actually in late 2021. And the book was supposed to be delivered in 22 and it's going to be out by the middle of the year. But then, of course, Robert started saying, oh, there's a new record coming, new record's coming. So I was like, well, hang on a second. All right, so let's hang on to that one for a bit. So I had to sit on it for a while, waiting for Songs of a Lost World to actually come out. And then so I could include that because otherwise I thought, you know what will happen? I'll finish the book, I'll hand it in, it'll be published. And then like a month later, the new record will come out and my book will instantly be out of date.
Right. Yeah, I remember I asked Stephen Lamb about it. Stephen Lamb he's the guy in charge of Son of. I said, have you done anything on the Cure yet? At the time, this was maybe 3 years ago, and So at that time, I'm sure he was having discussions with you about it.
Oh yeah, I was already on board for that one because I actually the way I got involved with Sonic Bond was I saw one of the books in the library here. It was the Kate Bush one, and I picked it up and I read that. And at the back, it said like, looking for authors, and I was like, huh, okay. So I went online to see, what they were all about, and I thought, wonder if they've got a book on the cure, and they didn't. And I thought, oh, okay,
Oh
this
yeah.
could be an interesting way for me to get into it because I've never written non-fiction at that length before. I mean, I generally write fiction and horror fiction at that. So for me to do a whole book, which is stuff that actually happened, is a bit of a novelty.
Well, let's talk about where people can find out more about you online. What other books you have? Are you if people go to Amazon, or do you have a website or social media that people can go to?
Yes, I really could be doing a bit more to exploit my myself, I suppose. But I do have a blog, which is Matthew R. Davis Fiction at WordPress.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Blue Sky. I'm pretty open there. I don't have a particularly professional way of going about anything, I'm afraid. I don't know. I was trying to be authentic in these things and just be myself as opposed to like, here's my slick media presence. But I mean, really, I could do a bit better, I think. But it's just sometimes it's hard just to keep the wheels in the tracks at all. So, um, yeah, you can look me up, Matthew R. Davis. I do have a bunch of other books. My first collection of short stories. You can see the Cure influence right there.
If only tonight we could sleep. Yes, that's
It's a
off of
song.
Kiss Me, Kiss Me. That's the name of the song.
Yeah, it's the name of the song.
Kiss Me,
Yeah.
Kiss Me, Kiss Me. Yep, that's cool.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite songs. I actually performed a version of that live at the book launch. I put a band together because I'm a musician as well, and I haven't really been playing in bands for a while now. But I put together a little pickup group for that one just to do a few of my songs in between readings from the book. And I thought, well, you know what? Why not do a cover of that song since I borrowed the title for the book?
That's cool.
So that was quite interesting. That was a very interesting experience. That's one of two Cure songs I performed live. I also did a cover of This Is a Lie off Wild Mood Swings
Yeah.
as part of an acoustic duo many, many moons ago now. That one's on YouTube too, though I'm not going to tell anyone where to find it because it's pretty ropey.
All right.
But the guy that I was in the duo with, he posted it and then shared it with me, and I'm like, "Ew, okay, yep." I was,
Yeah.
I was 20 years old and I wasn't much of a singer at the time, and yeah, trying to tackle an orchestral waltz with just two acoustic guitars is maybe a little more ambitious than we could handle at the time.
Well,
But yeah,
congratulations on this book, The Cure, Every Album, Every Song. It's out now. It's wherever books are sold, and you can look for it on Amazon, all the usual places. Sonic Bond, burningshed.com is where you can get it in the UK. And if you want to look for it in your nearest independent bookstore, you can find your nearest store at bookedonrock.com. Matthew, thank you so much for doing this. We've been working on trying to get this schedule for a while. I'm glad we made this happen. And again, congratulations on the book. I always love reading about and talking about The Cure.
thank you for having me, Eric.